I married you because my family required a duchess, not because I required a wife." The words fell across the ballroom of Valancrest Manor with the precision of a blade. Lady Evelina Hartwell stood beneath the glow of the chandeliers, her gloved hands folded quietly before her, while every noble guest in the room pretended not to listen. The musicians had stopped playing. The servants carrying silver trays had slowed their steps. Even the gentlemen who had been laughing near the fireplace turned their heads toward the center of the room. And beside her stood the man who had just reduced their marriage to a public arrangement, Duke Alistair Ravensmere. A man known throughout London society for his discipline, his restraint, and his refusal to let emotion govern a single decision. His new wife had been Duchess of Ravensmere for only 3 weeks, and already he was reminding everyone that she had not entered his life through affection. She had entered it through necessity. Evelina did not lower her eyes. That more than anything surprised him. "I understand, Your Grace," she replied softly. A few women nearby exchanged amused glances. They had expected tears. They had expected a young wife embarrassed by the coldness of her husband. They had expected weakness. Instead, Evelina simply lifted her chin. "I was not under the impression that affection was part of our agreement." A silence followed, not an uncomfortable silence. A dangerous one, because everyone in that room understood what had happened. The Duchess had not fought back with anger. She had done something far more unsettling. She had accepted his cruelty without allowing it to diminish her. Duke Alistair's expression remained unchanged, but something in his eyes shifted, only slightly, enough that no one noticed, except the man himself. For the first time in years, someone had stood before him without trying to win his approval, and he did not know what to do with that. Lady Corisande Whitmore, the Duke's aunt, and the woman who had arranged the marriage, gave a small laugh from beside the marble staircase. "My dear Evelina," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "you must not mistake His Grace's honesty for unkindness. A marriage between noble families is rarely built upon childish dreams." The message was clear. Know your place. Evelina looked toward the older woman. "I have never mistaken honesty for kindness, Lady Corisande." Several guests looked away. A few hid smiles behind their fans, because the Duchess had answered politely. But she had answered. Lady Corisande's expression hardened. The woman had expected a frightened bride from a declining family, someone grateful for the title, someone willing to remain silent because the Ravensmere name had rescued her from obscurity. But Evelina Hartwell was not what they had purchased, and that was the first mistake they made. The second was believing that because she had married the Duke in silence, she would live her entire life quietly. The truth was that the marriage everyone in the ballroom considered a transaction would soon become the very thing that exposed the secrets hidden inside Valancrest Manor. Because no one in that room knew that the Duchess they had just humiliated possessed a letter that could challenge the Ravensmere inheritance itself. If you are listening from wherever you are in the world, share with us where you are watching this story today. Remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of courage, injustice, and redemption. And if these stories mean something to you, consider supporting the channel so more forgotten voices from the past can finally be heard. Now let us return to the beginning, to the moment when Evelina Hartwell first stepped into a world that never intended to accept her. Before she became Duchess of Ravensmere, Evelina had been the daughter of a respected but modest country gentleman whose estate had never carried the wealth of the great families surrounding it. Hartwell Manor had been beautiful once, not grand, not imposing, but warm. There had been roses along the stone walls in summer, fresh bread from the kitchen every morning, and long evenings beside the library fire where her father taught her. That knowledge was a possession no one could take away. He had not given her a fortune. He had given her something far more unusual for a woman of her position: confidence. When her father died, however, confidence did not protect her from the realities of society. The estate passed through complicated arrangements. Debts remained. Relatives who had once visited with smiles suddenly found reasons to stay away, and Evelina discovered what many women of her era knew too well. A woman without financial protection could become invisible overnight. Then came the offer from the Ravensmere family. A marriage, not a romance. Not a courtship, a solution. Duke Alistair Ravensmere needed a wife. His title required a duchess. His family expected an heir. His advisors insisted that society would not tolerate a duke, continuing without a respectable household. Evelina needed security. The arrangement seemed simple. Too simple. She would marry him. She would manage the household. She would appear beside him at public events, and in return, she would have protection from the uncertainty that had followed her father's death. Alistair had made his position clear from their first meeting. He was not cruel. That was almost worse. Cruel men could be hated. Cold men could be ignored. But a man like Alistair Ravensmere offered nothing to fight against. He was polite, formal, impossible to reach. During their wedding breakfast, he had spoken to her with the same careful tone he used with his estate managers. He had discussed household expectations, public appearances, family obligations. Not once had he asked what she enjoyed. Not once had he asked what she feared. Not once had he looked at her as a woman, only as a role. Evelina accepted this because she had already learned that survival sometimes required patience. But she also observed, and Evelina noticed everything. She noticed that Lady Coruscant always appeared whenever financial matters were discussed. She noticed that certain estate records disappeared from the Duke's library. She noticed that servants became quiet whenever the subject of the previous Duchess of Ravensmere was mentioned. Most importantly, she noticed that Alistair himself seemed unaware of how much of his own household was controlled by others. The first time Evelina entered the locked library, it was not by accident. It happened during a winter evening when rain struck the windows and the wind forced everyone indoors. The Duke had left for a meeting with his solicitor in London. Lady Coruscant had retired early, and Evelina, searching for a book she had promised to return to the housekeeper, found herself standing before a cabinet she had never seen opened. Inside was a small wooden box, plain, old, secured with a lock. She did not open it, not then, but beneath it was something that caught her attention. A single piece of folded paper. Only one name was visible, her own. Evelina reached toward it, then stopped, because footsteps sounded in the corridor. Someone was coming. She closed the cabinet quickly and stepped away. The door opened moments later. Duke Alistair stood there. For the first time since their marriage, his expression showed something other than controlled distance. Suspicion. You were looking for something. Evelina met his gaze. No, Your Grace. It was not entirely a lie. She had not been looking for secrets. But now she knew they existed. Alistair watched her for a long moment. Then his eyes moved toward the cabinet. He had seen enough. You should be careful in this house. The warning was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried weight. Evelina looked at him. Is that a warning from my husband? A pause, or from someone else? For once the Duke had no immediate answer, because the question reached somewhere he had spent years avoiding. The possibility that the danger inside Valancrest Manor did not come from strangers. It came from those closest to him. That night Evelina returned to her room and found something placed beside her candle. A small envelope, no seal, no name. Inside was a short message, written in a trembling hand. Do not trust the woman who smiles while she counts what belongs to you. Evelina read the sentence twice, then a third time. And for the first time since arriving at Valancrest Manor, she understood that her marriage was not the only arrangement built on secrets. The question was no longer whether the Duke wanted a wife in name only. The question was whether he would recognize the truth before the people around him destroyed the one person who might save him. The following morning, Evelina did not mention the letter. That decision was not born from fear, it was born from understanding. She had spent enough time among powerful families to know that a secret revealed too early was often a secret wasted. The person who had placed the envelope beside her candle wanted a reaction. They wanted panic accusation, perhaps even a confrontation that could be used against her. So she did the one thing they had not expected. She remained calm. At breakfast, the Duke sat across from her at the long table reading correspondence, while the servants moved quietly around them. The room was filled with the usual signs of wealth that separated Valancrest Manor from ordinary homes. Warm pastries served on porcelain plates, silver pots of tea, crystal glasses filled with preserved fruit and fresh flowers, arranged despite the winter cold outside. But Evelina noticed something else. The Duke had not touched his coffee. He had been staring at the same letter for several minutes. "You seem distracted, Your Grace," she said. Alistair looked up. "I was unaware my attention was being observed." It is difficult not to observe someone who has spent 3 weeks making certain everyone knows he observes nothing. A faint change crossed his face. Not anger, not amusement, something closer to surprise. Evelina returned her attention to her plate. She had never spoken to him this directly before, and for the first time she wondered if the Duke's distance was not because he lacked feeling. Perhaps it was because he had trained himself never to show it. Before he could answer, the butler entered with a message. "Your Grace, Lady Corisande requests your presence in the library immediately." Alistair folded the paper in his hand. "Did she say why?" The butler hesitated, only for a second, but Evelina saw it. There was mention of the household accounts. "Your Grace." The Duke stood. Then he looked toward Evelina. "You should not concern yourself with matters that do not involve you." It was a familiar sentence, a wall disguised as advice. But this time Evelina noticed something different. His voice lacked certainty. "I believe I have learned something since arriving here," she replied. "And what is that?" "That matters involving this household have a way of becoming my concern eventually." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Alistair left. Evelina waited until the door closed. Only then did she look toward the corridor leading to the library. She did not follow him, not yet. Instead, she walked toward the servants' passage near the rear staircase, where she had noticed the older staff often gathered while completing their duties. That was where she found Mrs. Bell, the former housekeeper who had served the Ravensmere family for nearly 30 years. The elderly woman lowered her voice when Evelina approached. "Your Grace, I hope I have not offended by speaking when not invited." "You have not," Evelina said. "But I believe you may know something I need to understand." Mrs. Bell's hands tightened around the folded cloth she carried. For a moment she looked toward the hallway, as if even the walls of Valancrest Manor had learned how to listen. "I knew the previous Duchess," she whispered. Evelina remained still, and Mrs. Bell swallowed. And she was not the woman people claimed she was. A cold feeling moved through Evelina, not from the winter air, from the realization that the secrets of this house were older than her own arrival. "She left something behind," Mrs. Bell continued, "something Lady Corisande wanted forgotten." "What was it?" The old housekeeper looked at her carefully. "I do not know everything, but I know this. Before the previous Duchess died, she asked me to keep one thing safe." Evelina's heart quickened. A letter Mrs. Bell's expression changed, because the guess had been too accurate. Before she could answer, footsteps sounded from the corridor. Both women fell silent, and as Evelina turned toward the sound, she realized that someone inside Valancrest Manor had already discovered she was searching for the truth. Mrs. Bell stepped back immediately. The fear in her eyes told Evelina more than any confession could have done. Someone was approaching, not a servant carrying linens, not a footman passing through the corridor. The footsteps were slow, confident, the footsteps of someone who believed every door in Valancrest Manor belonged to them. Mrs. Bell lowered her voice. "Your Grace, you must leave this passage." "Why?" "Because those who hide the truth do not forgive those who search for it." Evelina looked at the elderly woman. For a brief moment, she saw the same expression she had seen in her father's final days, a person who had carried a burden alone for too long. But before she could ask another question, the footsteps stopped. A shadow appeared beneath the doorway. Then Lady Corisande entered. Her dark gown brushed against the floor as she stepped into the servants' corridor, a place where women of her rank rarely walked unless they intended to be seen. Her smile was perfectly composed. That was what made it unsettling. "Your Grace," she said. I had not realized the Duchess had taken such an interest in household staff. Evelina did not move, and I had not realized conversation with those who have served this family for decades required permission. Mrs. Bell lowered her head. Lady Corisande's eyes shifted toward the old housekeeper. There was no anger, only calculation. Mrs. Bell has a tendency to remember things that are no longer useful. The words were gentle. The meaning was not. Evelina understood immediately. This was not a woman trying to correct gossip. This was a woman warning a witness. Perhaps memories are only considered useless by those who fear what they contain, Evelina replied. The corridor became silent. Even Mrs. Bell stopped breathing for a moment. Lady Corisande studied the young Duchess carefully. You are adjusting quickly to your position. No, Evelina answered. I am adjusting to the reality of it. The older woman smiled faintly. And what reality is that a title can open many doors? Evelina glanced toward the library corridor, but it does not guarantee that what lies behind those doors belongs to you. For the first time, Lady Corisande's expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. Evelina had struck something real. Lady Corisande stepped closer. You would do well to remember that curiosity has ruined many women who believed intelligence made them powerful. Evelina held her gaze. And you would do well to remember that silence has protected many people who did not deserve protection. Neither woman looked away. It was not a quarrel. Not yet. It was a declaration. Then Lady Corisande turned toward Mrs. Bell. You may return to your duties. The housekeeper hesitated. Evelina noticed. Lady Corisande noticed too. That was the problem. Everyone in Valancrest Manor had learned to survive by watching the smallest movements. A pause, a glance, a hand trembling near a teacup, a servant who suddenly forgot how to speak. The truth did not disappear. It simply waited. Later that afternoon, Evelina found herself alone in the drawing room while rain struck against the windows. The Duke had not returned from the library meeting. Neither had Lady Corisande. And for the first time since her marriage, Evelina wondered whether Alistair was not the person keeping her away from the truth. Perhaps he was the person being kept away from it as well. The thought unsettled her more than she expected, because it would have been easier if her husband had simply been careless, easier if he had been arrogant, easier if he had been exactly what society believed him to be. But the man she had seen that morning was not a man who enjoyed controlling others. He was a man who had never questioned who controlled him. When the library door finally opened after sunset, Evelina heard voices from the corridor. She had no intention of listening, but then she heard her name. She moved closer to the half-open doorway. Not enough to be discovered. Only enough to hear. You cannot allow her to investigate further, Lady Corisande said. The Duke's voice answered colder than usual. She is my wife. She is a woman who arrived here with no understanding of the Ravensmere family. She understands enough to notice something is wrong. Silence. A long one. Then Lady Corisande spoke again. Your Grace, your late father, trusted me because I protected this family. No, the Duke's voice was quiet. You protected an image of this family. Evelina froze, because that was not the voice of the distant husband who had stood beside her in the ballroom. That was the voice of a man beginning to question everything. Lady Corisande lowered her tone. If you continue down this path, you will lose more than your reputation. And what exactly am I supposed to lose? A pause. Then, the inheritance you have spent your entire life believing was yours. Evelina stepped back. The words followed her even after she returned to her room. The inheritance. The hidden box. The letter with her name. The previous Duchess. They were not separate mysteries. They were pieces of the same secret. That evening, Evelina opened the small envelope again and examined the handwriting beneath the candlelight. The message had been brief, but the person who wrote it had chosen every word carefully. Do not trust the woman who smiles while she counts what belongs to you. Now Evelina understood. The warning had not only been about Lady Corisande, it had been about everything she had spent years arranging. And somewhere inside Valancrest Manor, hidden behind locked doors and polite conversations, there was a truth that could destroy the foundation of the Ravensmere name. The only question was whether Evelina would uncover it before those who feared the truth decided she had become too dangerous to remain. The answer began to reveal itself the very next morning. Evelina entered the breakfast room expecting the usual silence between herself and the Duke. Instead, she found Alistair already waiting. He was not reading correspondence. He was not reviewing estate papers. He was simply sitting there looking toward the rain-covered windows as though he had spent the entire night awake. When she approached, he stood. Not because tradition required it, because he chose to. A small gesture, but one Evelina noticed. Your Grace, she said. Evelina. It was the first time he had spoken her name without a title attached to it. The change was so slight that another person might have missed it. She did not. You heard the conversation outside the library. It was not a question. Evelina remained silent. The Duke looked down at the table. I thought you might have. Then why did you not confront me? Because I was uncertain whether I was angry that you listened. He paused. Or angry that I understood why you felt you had to. The honesty surprised her. Not because it was dramatic, because it was rare. Men like Alistair Ravensmere were trained to reveal nothing that could be used against them, yet there he was, admitting uncertainty. I did not come to Valancrest Manor searching for your family's secrets, Evelina said. I know. I came because I had nowhere else to go. The Duke looked at her. For the first time she allowed him to see the truth she had hidden beneath composure, not weakness, not desperation. The quiet exhaustion of a woman who had spent months being told that gratitude should replace dignity. My father's death changed everything, she continued. People who once called me welcome suddenly treated me as an inconvenience. I learned quickly that a woman's place can disappear the moment she no longer benefits someone. Alistair's expression tightened, because he understood something he had not understood before. The marriage arrangement had protected her. But it had also placed her in another form of dependence. You believe I have done the same? Evelina looked at him. I believe you were taught that providing a roof was the same as offering belonging. The words struck harder than accusation. Because they were not meant to hurt him, they were meant to be true. For a moment the Duke said nothing. Then he reached into the drawer beside him and removed a small key. Evelina recognized it immediately, the same type of key that secured the old wooden box. This belonged to my mother, he said. The name itself changed the atmosphere between them. The previous Duchess of Ravensmere, the woman whose memory had become a forbidden subject throughout the house. She kept records of everything, Alistair continued. Letters, accounts, household decisions, and Lady Corisande. She insisted my mother became confused in her final years. Evelina watched him carefully. Do you believe that... The Duke did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. I believed what I was told, he finally said. A confession, small, but enormous, because for a man like Alistair, admitting he had been deceived was almost the same as admitting he had failed. I found inconsistencies in the estate accounts years ago, he continued, but every explanation came from people I trusted. And now I am beginning to wonder if trust was simply another word for not asking questions. Before Evelina could respond, the door opened. A young maid entered carrying a tray. She stopped the moment she saw the two of them together, not arguing, not distant. Together. The maid quickly lowered her eyes. My apologies, Your Grace. But before she left, Evelina noticed something. The maid's hand was trembling, not from fear of interrupting, from fear of something else. After breakfast, Evelina followed the girl quietly to the servants' corridor. The maid turned when she heard her. I did not mean to trouble you, Your Grace. You have not. The girl hesitated. My name is Clara. Clara, why were you frightened? The young woman looked around, then lowered her voice. Because Mrs. Bell was not the only one who knew about the previous Duchess. Evelina remained still. Who else? Clara swallowed. There was a footman named Thomas. He worked here before Lady Corisande dismissed him. Why was he dismissed? The maid looked toward the closed doors. Because he carried a letter that was never supposed to reach London. A cold feeling passed through Evelina. A letter from whom Clara's eyes lifted. From the previous Duchess. The corridor fell silent. Not because there was nothing to say, because too much had suddenly become possible. A missing servant, a hidden letter, a locked box, and a family secret powerful enough that people had been removed from the household to keep it buried. Evelina thanked Clara and returned to her room. There she opened the small envelope once more and placed it beside a blank sheet of paper. For the first time since arriving at Valancrest Manor, she began writing. Not a confession, not a plea, a record. Every name, every date, every inconsistency, every person who had tried to convince her that silence was safer than truth. Because Evelina Hartwell had spent her entire life being told that powerful families decided the fate of women like her. But now she had something they had not expected. Patience. And the first time in her life that she chose to fight for herself, she was no longer fighting alone. The first time in her life that she chose to fight for herself, she was no longer fighting alone. But Evelina knew that having an ally was not the same as being safe. A man could change his mind. A promise could be broken. And in a house where secrets had survived for years, trust had to be earned, one careful step at a time. That afternoon she returned to the small room beside the library, where she had first discovered the locked cabinet. She did not enter like a curious guest. She entered like someone who understood that every object in Valancrest Manor had a history. The fire burned low in the grate. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood. The Duke's desk remained untouched, but the cabinet was different. The lock was still closed. The box was still hidden, yet someone had moved it, only slightly. A person who did not know Evelina, was trained to notice details, might have believed nothing had changed. But the angle of the cabinet door was wrong. The dust beneath the wooden box had been disturbed. Someone else had been searching. Evelina stepped closer, then she stopped. A sound came from the corridor. Not footsteps, a whisper. She moved toward the door and left it open by only a narrow space. Through the opening she saw Lady Corisande speaking with the estate solicitor. The older woman's voice was low. "You told me the Duchess would remain grateful." The solicitor shifted uncomfortably. "She has proven more observant than expected. Observant women are often mistaken for troublesome women." Evelina felt her hand tighten against the edge of the door. The solicitor glanced down the corridor. "She cannot be removed without creating questions." "Not removed," Lady Corisande replied. A pause, discredited. The word hung in the air. "Cold, precise." The solicitor lowered his voice. "And how do you intend to accomplish that?" Lady Corisande looked toward the library. "By giving society exactly what it already expects from a woman who refuses to stay in her place." Evelina stepped back. Not because she was afraid, because she finally understood the danger. They did not need to prove she had done something wrong. They only needed people to believe she was difficult, unstable, unfit. A woman's reputation could be taken away without a single piece of evidence, and Lady Corisande knew it. That evening the Duke found Evelina in the library. She had expected questions. Instead, he noticed the papers spread across the desk. "You are keeping records?" "Yes." "Of what?" "Of everything." Alistair walked closer. For once he did not command, he asked, "Do you believe I am part of this?" The question surprised her, not because she had never considered it, because she realized he truly wanted the answer. Evelina looked at him. "I believe you have been protected from the truth because your position allowed others to make decisions for you." His expression darkened. "And if I had been unwilling to listen, then I would have found another way." There was no threat in her voice, only certainty. The Duke looked at the papers again. Names, dates, questions. A pattern forming slowly. "You remind me of someone." Evelina looked up. "Your mother?" He did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. She was not easily persuaded. A faint sadness entered his voice. People called it stubbornness when she refused to accept what others told her. Evelina understood. Women are often called difficult when they stop being convenient. The Duke looked at her, and something changed. Not love, not yet, but respect. A respect that had not existed when he first placed a ring on her finger. Before he could speak, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Bell entered. Her face was pale. "Your Grace." The Duke turned. "What is it?" The old housekeeper held a small object wrapped in cloth. "I found this hidden among the old household linens." She looked at Evelina. "And I believe it belonged to the previous Duchess." The cloth was placed on the desk. Inside was a narrow journal, not large, not impressive, but worn from years of being handled. Alistair stared at it. "My mother's handwriting." Mrs. Bell nodded. "I was told to destroy it." The room became completely silent. Evelina looked at her, by whom Mrs. Bell lowered her eyes. Lady Corisande. The Duke reached toward the journal. But before he opened it, Evelina noticed something written on the first page. Not a message, not a name, a date. The same year his father died. And beneath it, one sentence that made Alistair's expression change completely. The inheritance was never meant to belong to the person who took it. For the first time, the Duke looked less like a man defending his family name, and more like a man realizing that the family name itself had been built on a lie. Alistair did not open the journal immediately. That hesitation told Evelina more than the words on the page. A man who feared losing something valuable would have rushed to protect it. A man who feared discovering something painful would hesitate. The Duke had spent his entire life believing the Ravensmere name represented duty, honor, and tradition. Now he was holding the possibility that it represented something else. Betrayal. Mrs. Bell quietly stepped away from the desk. "I should leave you both." "No," Alistair said. The command was gentle but firm. The old housekeeper stopped. "If my mother trusted you with this, then you are part of the truth." Mrs. Bell lowered her head. "I only wished to protect what remained of her memory." The Duke looked at the journal. "And how long have you carried this? 8 years?" The answer struck him. 8 years. Long enough for grief to become ordinary. Long enough for a secret to become a burden someone learned to carry. Evelina watched her husband carefully. She expected anger. Instead, she saw something much quieter, regret. "You knew something was wrong," she said. Alistair did not deny it. "I knew my mother changed before her death." His voice became lower. She became cautious. She stopped speaking freely around certain people. She began locking away papers she had once left openly on her desk. "And you believed the explanation you were given?" "Yes." The admission was almost painful for him to say, because it was easier. Evelina looked at him, not with judgment, with understanding, because she knew that kind of deception. Not the same deception, but the same wound. The pain of discovering that the people who were supposed to protect you had instead decided what truth you were allowed to have. Alistair opened the journal. The first pages contained ordinary entries, household matters, appointments, names of visitors, nothing unusual. Then they reached a section where the handwriting changed, more hurried, more tense. The previous Duchess had begun recording conversations. One name appeared repeatedly, Lady Corisande. Another appeared beside it. The late Duke of Ravensmere. Alistair stopped reading. My father. Evelina leaned closer. The entry beneath the names was short. My husband believes he is protecting the family. He does not understand that he has been protecting those who are taking it apart. The Duke stepped away from the desk. For several seconds he said nothing. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the winter rain continued against the windows. No one spoke. Because sometimes silence was not empty. Sometimes silence was the moment a person finally understood the truth. "She knew," Alistair whispered. Evelina looked at him. She knew what was happening. "Yes." His hand rested against the edge of the desk, and she tried to stop it. Mrs. Bell nodded. She tried to tell people, but Lady Corisande had already convinced many that the Duchess was becoming emotional after years of pressure. Evelina felt a chill, not because she was surprised, because she recognized the pattern. A woman questioned, a woman isolated, a woman described as unreliable until society stopped listening. She was not losing her mind, Evelina said quietly. "No," Mrs. Bell replied. She was losing the ability to make others believe her. The words stayed in the room because they explained everything. The silence, the missing papers, the servants who were dismissed, the warnings hidden in envelopes, the careful control of information. Then another page slipped loose from the journal. A folded document had been hidden between the pages. Alistair unfolded it. His expression changed immediately. "What is it?" He did not answer. Evelina stepped closer. The document was not a letter. It was a copy of an account record, a transfer of funds, a large amount, moved from the Ravensmere estate. But not to the household, not to the Duke, to a private account under a name Evelina did not recognize. Alistair recognized it. His face became pale. "Who is it?" The Duke looked toward the door, as if he suddenly feared the walls themselves. "It belonged to my father's cousin." "Was he involved?" "No." A pause. "He died 3 years before this transfer was made." The meaning settled over them. Someone had used the name of a dead man. Someone had created a path for money to disappear without immediate suspicion. Evelina looked at the document. "This is not only about inheritance. Alistair met her eyes. No, it is about control. The Duke nodded slowly, and for the first time since their marriage, they stood on the same side of a battle neither of them had chosen. But before they could examine the document further, a sound came from outside the library. A door closing, someone leaving. Alistair moved quickly toward the corridor. When he opened the door, no one was there. Only a single piece of paper resting on the floor. Evelina picked it up. Her fingers tightened as she read the message. Stop searching for what your husband was never meant to inherit, because the next discovery will not only destroy the Ravensmere name, it will destroy the woman who carries it. Because the next discovery will not only destroy the Ravensmere name, it will destroy the woman who carries it. Evelina read the message again, not because she doubted the words, because she understood exactly what they were intended to do. The person who left it wanted her afraid. They wanted her to imagine disgrace, isolation, the loss of the very title that had been presented as her salvation. But Evelina had already lost something far more frightening than a title. She had lost the illusion that safety came from being accepted by powerful people. And once that illusion was gone, threats became easier to recognize. This was meant for me, she said. Alistair took the paper from her hand. No. His voice was firm. It was meant to frighten you. The distinction mattered. Evelina looked at him. You believe there is a difference? Yes. The Duke folded the note carefully. Because someone who truly held power would not need to warn us. For the first time, Evelina saw something new in him, not the confidence of a duke, the determination of a man who had finally decided to look directly at what surrounded him. The following day, Alistair did something that shocked the entire household. He dismissed the usual morning review of estate matters and requested every account ledger from the past 10 years, not through Lady Corisande, not through the steward she trusted, directly. The request travelled through the servants' quarters before it reached the drawing rooms. And by afternoon, everyone at Valancrest Manor knew. The Duke was asking questions. That alone was dangerous, because questions were the beginning of every change. Lady Corisande appeared in the library shortly after the ledgers arrived. She did not knock. She entered as though the room still belonged to her. You are making a serious mistake. Alistair remained behind the desk. Am I? Yes. Her eyes moved toward the documents. Suspicion is a dangerous habit for a gentleman of your position, and blind trust is a dangerous habit for a man responsible for an entire estate. The answer was calm, but it was not the answer she expected. Lady Corisande studied him. Then she looked toward Evelina, who stood near the window. I see. A small smile appeared. The Duchess has convinced you that those who served your family for years are suddenly your enemies. Evelina did not respond, because she knew exactly what Lady Corisande wanted. An emotional reaction, a defense, a moment of anger that could later be described as instability. Instead, she remained silent, and that silence unsettled the older woman more than an argument would have. She has changed you, Lady Corisande said. Alistair's expression hardened. No. He looked at the ledgers. She has made me question what I should have questioned years ago. For the first time, Lady Corisande lost control of her expression, only briefly. But it was enough. Evelina saw it. Alistair saw it, and Lady Corisande realized they had both seen. The room became still. Then she recovered. You do not know what you are accusing people of. No, Alistair replied. That is why I am investigating, not accusing, not condemning, investigating. It was a simple difference, but it removed the weapon she had expected to use. Lady Corisande left the library without another word. But after the door closed, Evelina noticed that Alistair did not return immediately to the documents. He looked troubled. You believe she knows we found something? Yes. And you believe she will act? Yes. The Duke nodded slowly. Then we must discover what she fears before she destroys the evidence. Evelina looked at the stack of ledgers. There was something almost strange about standing beside him. A few weeks earlier, he had barely looked at her across a room. Now he was trusting her judgment. Not because she was his wife, because she had earned his trust. That evening, Mrs. Bell returned with another piece of information. It was not a letter. It was a name. Thomas Whitby, she said. The footman who disappeared. Evelina looked up. Where is he now? Mrs. Bell hesitated. In a village outside London. And why did he leave? The old housekeeper's expression became heavy. Because he believed someone was trying to make him disappear. The fire burned quietly. The answer was simple. The missing servant, the hidden journal, the stolen funds, they were all connected. But Thomas Whitby was the first person who could explain how. The next morning Alistair made arrangements to travel, not as a duke arriving with servants and authority, as a man searching for the truth his own family had buried. And Evelina understood that the greatest danger was no longer discovering the secret. The greatest danger was that the people who had protected the secret for so long would realize the Duke and Duchess were no longer willing to remain silent. And they realized it sooner than Evelina expected. The carriage had barely been prepared for the journey to find Thomas Whitby when a new rumor began moving through the household. It did not arrive through official words. It arrived the way all dangerous things arrived at Valancrest Manor, quietly, a whisper between servants, a pause in conversation when Evelina entered a room, a glance exchanged near the kitchen door. By evening the rumor had reached the drawing room. The Duchess was asking too many questions. The Duchess was interfering in matters beyond her understanding. The Duchess was allowing suspicion to damage the Ravensmere name. Evelina listened from the doorway before entering, not because she enjoyed hearing people speak against her, because she needed to know who was speaking. That was the difference between being wounded and being prepared. When she stepped inside, the conversation ended immediately. Lady Corisande sat beside the fireplace holding a cup of tea with perfect calm. "Your Grace," she said, "we were discussing household concerns. I imagine so." Evelina moved toward the table. "And I imagine those concerns were not about the servants or the accounts." Lady Corisande smiled. "No, they were about reputation. Of course." The older woman placed her cup down. "Your position is new. You may not yet understand how quickly society judges a family when rumors begin." Evelina looked at her. "I understand very well." The answer was quiet. "I understand that rumors are often created before they are repeated." The room became still. Lady Corisande's expression remained controlled, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. "You are suggesting that I created these rumors. I am suggesting that someone benefits from them." A servant passing outside the room slowed for a moment. The words had traveled beyond the walls already. That was the danger Lady Corisande had created. She had turned reputation into a weapon. But weapons could also reveal the person holding them. Later that night, Alistair found Evelina in the library, reviewing the estate records. "You should rest." She looked up. "So should you." A faint expression crossed his face, the closest thing to amusement she had seen from him. "You have noticed that I notice many things. I am beginning to understand that." For a moment the tension between them softened, not disappeared, but changed. The distance that had existed since their marriage was no longer an empty space. It was a bridge being built carefully. Then Alistair placed a letter on the desk. It came from London. Evelina recognized the handwriting immediately. "Thomas Whitby." The Duke nodded. He agreed to meet. A sense of relief passed through her, not because the mystery was solved, because they had finally reached someone who had been pushed aside by the same people who had controlled the household. What did he say? Alistair looked at the letter. He said he did not leave Valancrest because he had done something wrong. A pause. He left because he discovered something he was never supposed to see. Evelina leaned closer. What did he see? The Duke unfolded the letter. A single sentence was written beneath the message arranging their meeting. "I saw who changed the document before the family solicitor received it." Evelina felt the meaning settle over her. The inheritance, the hidden account, the previous Duchess's warnings. They were no longer separate pieces. They were forming a complete picture. But before they could leave for London, another message arrived. This one was delivered by a trembling footman. It was addressed to the Duke. Alistair opened it. His expression changed. Evelina watched him carefully. "What happened?" He handed her the paper. The message contained only a few lines. "The old servant will not reach you, and neither will the truth he carries." Evelina looked at the words, then at her husband. For the first time, neither of them questioned whether the threat was real, because the people who had spent years protecting the secret had finally stopped hiding. They had begun fighting back. And somewhere beyond the walls of Valancrest Manor, Thomas Whitby was carrying the one piece of evidence that could either restore the Ravensmere name or bring it completely down.